Hey guys, tonight we're biting into a story so juicy, so surreal, and so utterly spiked with historical weirdness that you might just choke on laughter before you fall asleep. Imagine this. A ship arrives at a misty European port. Sailors unload barrels of spices, bolts of silk, and then, with great care and hush-hush drama, they roll out a single, bizarre, spiny object. It's golden, it's glowing, it smells like dreams, and it looks like a medieval weapon got busy with a pine cone. You stare at it like it might blink back. It's a pineapple. And in the 1700s, this fruit wasn't just exotic. It was sacred. You probably won't survive this story. Not because it's dangerous, unless you count the lethal social pressure of not owning a pineapple in 1763, but because your brain might short-circuit when you learn just how far people went to worship this overpriced fruit grenade. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know, where are you listening from? And what time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're a curious European in the 18th century, and this strange object has arrived from a place you've only ever heard described in breathless poetry and sailors' half-drunk tales. The West Indies, the Caribbean, a place of impossible warmth, endless sugar cane, and fruit that tastes like the afterlife. But nothing prepared you for this. The pineapple looks alien. Sharp green crown, golden yellow skin etched like a diamond lattice. It doesn't resemble an apple, or a pine tree, or anything your mouth has ever considered biting. But the sailors say it's edible. More than edible, they say it's ecstasy. You lean in to smell it and are hit by a sweet aroma that seems engineered by angels. In reality, the fruit's journey here has been anything but angelic. It took weeks on hot ships, surviving only thanks to absurd layers of wrapping and attention. Most pineapples rotted before reaching European shores. Only the strongest, sometimes the luckiest, made it. You're looking at a survivor, a literal fruit celebrity, and you're not alone in your awe. Crowds gather. Wealthy merchants elbow past nobles just to catch a glimpse. You overhear a powdered wig whispering to another powdered wig, "Do you think the king's tried one?" A child weeps because she cannot touch it. A man in a red coat offers to buy the fruit from the dockmaster on the spot, for the price of a year's wages. He is laughed at, not because the offer is insulting, but because it's not enough. The pineapple is not for sale. It's for display. For now. Historians still argue whether the pineapple's early European appearance happened in Spain or the Netherlands first, but consensus generally agrees it hit Britain like a fragrant bombshell by the late 1600s. By the 1700s, it had fully achieved mythical status. And here's where it gets fun. You don't eat the pineapple. That would be wasteful. No, you exhibit it. You showcase it on a table at your banquet, carefully arranged atop gold-plated stands or crystal platters. Guests file in, pretending they aren't just here to see the pineapple. It becomes a talking point, a holy relic, and somehow a personality trait. "How did you get it?" someone whispers. "Oh, it just arrived from Jamaica," you say casually, even though it took 10 bribes, 3 backchannel letters, and your cousin who works in customs. You hold court by candlelight, posing near it. You don't slice it. You pose. Because in the 18th century, owning or merely borrowing a pineapple made you a person of taste, worldliness, and untouchable wealth. The fruit is an event, and people treat it with almost religious reverence. They believed it to be spiritually charged, if not outright magical. Some journals from the era describe the pineapple as the crown of nature's brilliance, and others outright call it divine. Its symmetry, its scent, its refusal to grow in cold climates. It was seen as evidence that paradise existed, and that Europe didn't have the password. One London pastor even tried to compare the pineapple to the Garden of Eden's forbidden fruit. A bit of a stretch, maybe, but who's going to argue with a man holding a Bible and a pineapple? There's also something else, something unspoken. You've heard murmurs that the pineapple can make you feel things, that there's something decadent, even slightly erotic in the way it tastes. A bite, they say, is like warmth sliding down your throat, like your tongue remembering something it never knew. And you want to taste it, but you don't. Not tonight. Tonight you simply admire, because this is a fruit for kings, for gods, for dreamers, and you, lucky you, are in the front row. You stand there, still half staring at the golden fruit under candlelight, when someone leans in to tell you the going rate. The pineapple, this overgrown grenade of delight, can cost upwards of £80 in 18th century London. Adjusted for today, that's like blowing $10,000 on a fruit salad. And that's for a single pineapple. Not a crate, not a farm. One. You look down at your shoes. Scuffed, slightly damp, definitely not worth £80. You look at the pineapple again. It glistens like royalty. That's when you learn the truth. No one buys pineapples to eat them. That would be like using a Fabergé egg as a paperweight. Instead, pineapples are rented, yes, rented, to make a dazzling appearance at your party and then quietly return the next morning. There were actual fruit rental services in London. You'd pay a hefty fee to have a pineapple perched prominently at your banquet, much like one might rent a chocolate fountain today, except the pineapple doesn't do anything but sit there and radiate wealth. Historians still argue whether the popularity of pineapple rentals started with the merchant class or trickled down from aristocratic absurdity. Either way, the arrangement was as ritualistic as it was ridiculous. You'd book a pineapple weeks in advance, polish your silver, send out the invitations, and let everyone know, discreetly, that a certain tropical guest would be attending. Sometimes, guests weren't even told where it would be placed, just so they had to explore your house to find it, like a scented game of hide and seek. And heaven forbid someone touch it. Pineapples were often enclosed in glass domes like religious relics. A light would be angled just right to catch its golden sides. No one dared suggest eating it. You don't eat a symbol. You inhale it. You revere it. You drop compliments like exquisite symmetry and divine texture. You take it in like it's a sermon. In fact, the pineapple became so central to social competition that the absence of one at a gathering was quietly noted. Gossip traveled fast. Lady Howarth didn't have a pineapple. Oh no, again? Social suicide. You can't help but laugh softly to yourself. Silently, of course. Because the joke here is not the pineapple, but the people orbiting around it like moths to a citrus-scented flame. The fruit became a stand-in for imperial power. If you had a pineapple, you weren't just rich, you were worldly, connected, exotic. You had access to ships and colonies and sugar plantations. Never mind the suffering that made it possible. The fruit was the sweet, sanitized tip of an empire. But the class implications didn't stop at parties. Some truly bold socialites walked the streets carrying pineapples like handbags. They weren't going to eat them. They were just going to be seen with them. There are actual reports. Yes, real, historical records of people strolling arm in arm through markets with pineapples tucked under their arms like the world's most expensive chihuahua. It gets stranger. Artists began including pineapples in portraits, not because the subjects grew or consumed them, but because it made them look cultured. You could be illiterate and incapable of dressing yourself, but if you had a pineapple in your portrait, congratulations, you were suddenly refined. One of the most notorious cases involved a merchant who couldn't afford a real pineapple for his daughter's wedding. So he borrowed one from his employer's dinner the night before, posed it as the centerpiece, then snuck it back in before morning. He almost got away with it, until someone recognized the fruit's peculiar curve and squealed. Pineapple shaming ensued. There's something wildly human about all this. The desire to project meaning onto objects. To signal status without saying a word. To believe that by standing next to something rare, you yourself become rare. And let's be real, pineapples are ridiculous. Even today, they're the only fruit that comes with its own crown. You can't casually slice into one. You need tools, determination, patience. They demand ceremony. In a way, they've always been little aristocrats of the produce aisle. But in the 18th century, they were gods. Theaters performed comedies featuring pineapples as punchlines. Novelists name-dropped the fruit in love letters. One French pamphlet even included an erotic poem about the pineapple's savage sweetness. A line so unintentionally funny It feels like it should be a perfume ad. And all the while, most people in Europe had never actually tasted one. They'd only heard whispers. What does it taste like? You ask a servant at the party. They look at you, pause, and answer, warm sunlight. You think they're joking. They're not. Because in this era, the pineapple has crossed from biology to mythology. It is no longer a fruit. It is legend. And you're still just hoping someone forgets to take it home. The next morning, the pineapple is gone. You notice it immediately, like a chandelier's been stolen or the sun forgot to rise. There's just a bare silver tray, an awkward space on the table, and a lingering scent of tropical perfume in the air. The party is over, but something about the pineapple remains with you. Not just its shape or cost, but the idea of it. Felt enchanted, didn't it? And you're not alone. Across Europe, people are whispering the same thing, that this fruit must have powers, that its origin lies beyond science, that perhaps it grew from volcanic soil kissed by spirits. Some even think it's medicinal, that it radiates energy. A few more ambitious thinkers propose it could be an alchemical key. Pineapple elixir, pineapple poultices, pineapple salvation. Historians still debate just how deeply 18th century people believed in the fruit's magic, but there's no question that they projected onto it everything they desired: power, pleasure, exoticism, and immortality. Which brings us to the most absurd part of all. Pineapples were used not only for show, but for healing. You hear about a gentleman with terrible gout who ordered mashed pineapple compresses applied to his knees. A duchess claimed it eased her melancholy, though that may have had more to do with the attention she received while eating it in public. You chuckle, but then someone brings out a pamphlet titled The Fruit of Paradise. An honest discourse on the ananas. It claims the pineapple helps digestion, cleanses the soul, relieves flatulence, and this is bold, cures heartbreak. You flip through it. The language is flowery. The claims are endless. No surprise, this was the golden age of humoral theory. The idea that your body is full of humors, blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile, and that diseases come from imbalance. Naturally, the pineapple was believed to restore harmony, especially if you had too much heat in your system. Cool fruit, warm blood. It all made a strange kind of sense. Apothecaries begin selling dried pineapple slices alongside herbs like ginseng and licorice root. Pineapple tea becomes a niche obsession among noblewomen who swear it helps with feminine moods. Some even boil it into syrup to be taken with a spoon at bedtime. You hear of a man who grinds pineapple skin into paste, applies it to his scalp, and claims his hairline is returning. Another swears it reduces the swelling in his hands. A third, clearly more ambitious, says his dreams have become more vivid, more pure, and less plagued by wolves. Fringe science? Absolutely. But in a world that believes in bleeding, leeches, and mercury pills, pineapple juice suddenly sounds like the sanest option. And then there's the church. You walk past a small chapel one morning and notice the strangest addition to the altar flowers. A single, uncut pineapple nestled among roses and lilies. You think it's a prank. But no, the symbolic. A local priest is giving a sermon titled The Fruit of Temptation, or The Crown of Creation. He speaks of pineapples as a divine challenge, a reminder that man's reach exceeds his grasp. God placed sweetness in the tropics, not in London. To possess such sweetness, he says, is to challenge heaven itself. It's a curious sermon. You're not sure whether to feel guilty or proud. Is owning a pineapple a sign of God's blessing, or your arrogance? Are you savoring creation or corrupting it? This spiritual tension spills over into philosophy clubs and botanical societies. Enlightenment thinkers start asking if it's ethical to grow tropical fruit in unnatural climates. If God wanted us to have pineapples in England, wouldn't he have planted them here? Historians still argue whether this was sincere theology or thinly veiled social commentary. Either way, it leads to one of the strangest intellectual debates of the era. Is pineapple cultivation a defiance of divine design? You attend a salon where two powdered gentlemen nearly duel over it. One insists that humans must bend nature to their will. The other declares that heating greenhouses to grow a Caribbean fruit in Derbyshire is blasphemous. They shout. A woman faints. A maid clutches the fruit tighter, as if protecting it from damnation. Through all this, the pineapple just sits there, silent, golden, smug. You get the sense it knows what it's doing. And you're beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, it is magic. So now you're thinking, if the pineapple is so coveted, so revered, and so magical, wouldn't the next logical step be to grow your own? Welcome to the most expensive, most irrational, and most gloriously heated arms race of the 18th century. The Pineapple Garden Wars. It starts innocently enough. A nobleman in Bath builds a modest greenhouse. He calls it a stove house, not because it resembles an oven, but because it is one. Growing pineapples in cold, gray Britain requires a bit more than enthusiasm. It requires a structure made of brick, glass, coal-fired furnaces, a small staff of pineapple whisperers, and the kind of money usually reserved for armies. You wander into one such estate, where the gardener greets you like a surgeon prepping for heart surgery. "Sure," he says, leading you past rows of prickly green tops. They're sleeping. Inside, it's a humid inferno. The air smells like syrup and damp wool. Every plant sits in a special pit, called a pine pit, surrounded by layers of manure, compost, and brick channels that funnel heat like a medieval HVAC system. You blink. Sweat beads on your forehead. These pineapples are living better than you are, and they're guarded like royalty. Keys to the pinery are held by trusted staff. Windows are sealed. Watering schedules are logged with the precision of naval timetables. Because if a rival noble steals even one pineapple, it's not just fruit theft, it's social assassination. Historians still argue whether the term pinery espionage was ever official, but there are enough reports of stolen plants, bribed gardeners, and mysteriously sabotaged greenhouses to raise a few eyebrows. You start hearing whispered names of legendary gardeners, pineapple masters, really, who were passed around aristocratic families like prized chefs. These men, and a few quietly brilliant women, were given stipends, titles, and occasionally marriage offers, simply because they could coax a pineapple to ripen under English skies. Then come the competitions. Picture this. A grand estate throws a harvest ball, not to celebrate wheat or barley, but because a pineapple has finally ripened. A single fruit. The guests dress in their best silks. There's music, wine, fanfare. A curtain is drawn back, and there it is, on a pedestal, glittering in candlelight like a golden trophy. One guest swoons. Another writes a sonnet. A third tries to sneak a sniff and is promptly escorted out. This is no longer agriculture. This is theater. And then, of course, come the lies. People begin to fake it. You hear of lords who import half-ripe pineapples from Jamaica, then pass them off as homegrown. One famously tried to glue dirt onto the base to make it seem like it came from his own garden. Another stuffed his pinery with wax replicas just to impress visitors. But true pineapple people, they know. They always know. There's even a code. When attending another noble's dinner, one might politely say, "And where was this one ripened?" Which translates to, "Is this pineapple legit? Or did you cheat like a lemon-scented fraud?" You try not to laugh when a guest nervously replies, "Oh, the southern beds." Sure, Jan. Some estates go so far as to build entire fake pineapple-growing wings, just to imply the presence of a pinery, even if it produces nothing. Empty greenhouses with just enough glass and coal smoke to fool the neighbors. It's the 18th century equivalent of putting a Ferrari logo on your donkey cart. This is the madness of the pineapple race. And yet, despite all the chaos, you can't help but admire it. These people believed in beauty, in spectacle, in cultivating the impossible. They turned fruit into fireworks. It's also where science and art collided. Early horticultural journals, yes, they existed, begin publishing pineapple temperature charts, manure recipes, and bizarre techniques like whispering to the plants during full moons. One farmer claims his pineapples grow faster when he reads them poetry. Another swears by Mozart. Historians still argue whether he was joking. By the end of the century, growing a pineapple at home became the 18th century version of having a Tesla with falcon doors. It was a statement, a brag, a literal hothouse flex. You stand in one such pinery, eyes wide, sweat pouring, and realize, this is faith, this is ambition, this is delusion baked at 85 degrees with a hint of citrus. You press your hand to the warm glass, and you wonder, how did we let a fruit take over our minds? Later that week, you visit Scotland. You weren't planning to, but someone at the salon mentioned the Dunmore pineapple, and your curiosity sprinted ahead of your schedule. So now here you are, trudging through dewy grass, coat damp, boots squelching slightly, only to stop dead in your tracks and stare, blinking, as your brain tries to process what your eyes already know. You are looking at a building shaped like a pineapple, not decorated with pineapples, not featuring a pineapple motif. The entire stone dome is, without exaggeration, a perfect, oversized replica of the spiky tropical fruit, carved with such obsessive detail that you half expect it to start ripening. It sits atop a pavilion like a crown, proud, pointless, glorious. You burst out laughing, not because it's silly, though it definitely is, but because you're finally seeing it clearly. This was never about fruit. This was about ego. Pineapples weren't consumed, they were displayed, like victories. And this was architectural smack talk in limestone. Historians still argue why Lord Dunmore built it. Some claim it was just a garden folly, a decorative structure meant to amuse. Others whisper it was a symbol of colonial triumph. A few suggest it was merely boredom taken to its most baroque conclusion. You walk through the lower levels. The architecture is symmetrical, elegant, but everyone knows why you're really here. You climb the steps. Look up. That crown of carved pineapple leaves looms above you like a reminder that money and taste don't always share a cab. But oh, how fun it all is. And it's not just Scotland. You start noticing pineapples everywhere. Not the fruit, no, the shape. The symbol. Banisters capped with pineapple finials. Bedposts carved into pineapple columns. Garden gates adorned with wrought iron pineapples like little spiky sentinels. Entire estates commissioned artists to subtly, and not so subtly, insert the pineapple into coat of arms designs. It becomes the "we get it, your fancy" code of 18th century design. And guess who takes the pineapple to the next level? Royalty, of course. You attend a gathering where a newly unveiled portrait of King Charles II is shown to the gasping elite. It depicts him receiving a pineapple, hands delicately cupped around the fruit as if accepting an offering from heaven itself. The scene? Completely staged. The fruit? Imported. The moment? Carefully orchestrated PR. You try not to choke on your punch. This isn't the only royal fruit pose. Across Europe, aristocrats commission paintings of themselves with pineapples balanced in their hands, on tables, in baskets. Some even request the fruit be inserted after the portrait was finished, an early form of Photoshop flexing. You hear about one lady who refused to marry a suitor because his estate lacked sufficient pineries. Another demanded her dowry include at least 3 pineapple-bearing trees. Love, apparently, is sweeter when it comes with fertilizer and heated glasshouses. Even fashion gets the fever. You pass a milliner's shop and see it. A hat shaped like a pineapple, worn by a mannequin that looks entirely too smug. Down the street, a seamstress displays corsets embroidered with pineapple patterns. One wealthy socialite is said to have commissioned silk gloves with tiny golden pineapples stitched into each finger, because nothing says elegance like fruit-themed fingertips. It's everywhere. Furniture, wallpaper, jewelry. There's a rumor of a London gentleman who had a gold snuff box crafted in the shape of a pineapple, encrusted with emerald leaves and ruby eyes. You don't know what the eyes were for. You don't ask. All of this, remember, for a fruit that rots within days and shreds your mouth if you eat too much of it. But it doesn't matter, because by now the pineapple has evolved. It's no longer just a fruit. It's a symbol of hospitality, of empire, of wealth so excessive you can literally carve it into your ceiling. You find yourself wondering, will people someday look back at us the same way? Will some future traveler marvel at avocado-themed soap dispensers or banana-shaped Bluetooth speakers? Probably. But tonight, you stand under a stone pineapple, wind brushing your coat, the sky streaked with gold, and you get it. You finally get it. This was never about flavor. It was always about fantasy. You wake up the next day with pineapple on the brain again. It's become a kind of low-grade obsession. You can't even walk through the market without spotting pineapples on signs, in shop windows, etched into teacups. It's like they're watching you, judging, daring you to understand them. And now, as if things weren't already strange, you're about to witness something truly absurd. The Great Pineapple Portrait Ceremony. You receive an invitation, very hush-hush, to an elite garden gathering. Not a ball, not a duel. Painting. The subject? Pineapple. The occasion? The first fruit ripened by a baronet in his own greenhouse. After 8 years of whispered prayers, manure negotiations, and enough coal to warm a village. You arrive in your best coat. Everyone's dressed like they're attending a coronation. Someone's dog wears a ruff. In the center of the garden, atop a marble pedestal, sits the pineapple. It's propped up just so, bathed in morning light, with an artist in a powdered wig nervously dabbing oil onto a canvas. No one is allowed to breathe too hard. The gardener stands nearby, looking both proud and terrified, like a man who has just delivered a royal heir. You ask yourself, is this really happening? Yes. Yes, it is. The artist captures the pineapple's every curve, every shade of gold and green. He pauses only to sip wine and mutter phrases like, a divine spiral. A small orchestra plays in the background. Light strings, something vaguely tropical. Someone begins reading poetry aloud. It rhymes. You quietly wish it didn't. Historians still argue whether these paintings were meant as botanical records or just flamboyant bragging rights. Some scholars even believe a few of these portraits were intended for private viewing, like fruit-themed boudoir art. And let's be honest, pineapples do flirt with you a little. That crown, that scent, that rough exterior hiding sweet reward. It's not just fruit. It's a metaphor wrapped in armor. But not everyone's buying it. You overhear a skeptical guest, probably from the city, snort under their breath, "It's just a pineapple." Silence follows. Utter silence. Even the dog stops panting. He is politely asked to leave. You never see him again. The rest of the party carries on. Later that evening, the pineapple is blessed. A reverend steps forward, murmurs a few words about divine bounty and human perseverance, and sprinkles it with rosewater. You expect applause, maybe a hymn. Instead, the fruit is gently lifted by gloved hands and placed into a custom-made glass dome lined with crushed velvet. And then it's wheeled away like a fragile newborn. You blink slowly. You think of the last time someone showed this much reverence to an actual human. You come up blank. Then, just when you think you've seen it all, someone tells you about the Royal Pineapple Vault. Apparently, some nobles have begun preserving the rinds of eaten pineapples in sealed drawers. Why? Because each rind tells a story. This one was eaten by the Duke of Argyll. This one graced a table at the coronation of so-and-so. There's even a rumor of one rind being kept in an ornate reliquary, complete with a Latin inscription and 3 rubies. You start to feel that familiar mix of disbelief and delight. It's ridiculous. It's over the top. It's perfect. Because here's the thing. In an age where most people lived on boiled cabbage and dry bread, the pineapple represented not just wealth, but escape. A moment of tropical sunshine in a soot-filled world. A fantasy you could smell, maybe even taste if you were lucky. And people clung to that fantasy like it was oxygen. One painter writes in his diary, "I would trade a year of gray for one mouthful of gold." He's talking about the pineapple. Or maybe he's not. Maybe, like all obsessions, this one's never really been about the object. Maybe it's about longing for warmth, for wonder, for something that doesn't rot too fast or disappoint too soon. You watch the artist finish the portrait. He signs it with a flourish. The crowd claps as if the fruit just won a duel. And you nod, quietly, respectfully, because whether or not you believe in its magic, the pineapple has earned your attention. You'd think that after witnessing a pineapple being painted like a Roman emperor, you'd seen the height of the absurdity. But no, because tonight you're being escorted, rather formally, to what is known as a pineapple tasting. Now, before you roll your eyes too hard, let's be clear. This is no mere fruit sampling. This is a ritual. A high-stakes culinary rite performed maybe once a decade by the few who are both wealthy enough to afford a pineapple and unhinged enough to actually cut into it. You arrive at a candlelit hall, where guests whisper and shuffle nervously. A pineapple sits at the center of a mahogany table like a royal prisoner awaiting its final hour. It glistens. It smirks. You feel the tension in the room. No one speaking above a murmur. The hostess steps forward, eyes sharp, blade sharper, and slowly, reverently, slices off the top. The room gasps. The aroma that escapes is overwhelming. It's like sugar and sunlight and perfume and everything good you ever smelled in childhood memories. It makes your teeth tingle. It makes your soul ache. One woman fans herself. Another sobs. Then comes the cutting. Each slice is measured with military precision. Thin, delicate wedges are distributed on fine porcelain. A footman announces, "The pineapple will now be tasted." And you lucky guest, lift your fork and take the bite. Oh wow, it's not just delicious, it's transcendental. You taste citrus, honey, vanilla, maybe a touch of caramelized sunset. You're fairly certain you just saw God wink at you through a pineapple wedge. And then, just as quickly, it's over. One bite, one moment, 1,000 lifetimes of waiting for that exact taste. Historians still argue whether these tasting events were purely elite performance or sincere culinary exploration. The truth is probably somewhere in between. But what's certain is that, for a brief moment in the 18th century, eating a pineapple was like breaking the sound barrier. You felt it, and that taste stayed with you. People would describe their one bite of pineapple for years afterward. Whole diaries were filled with page after page of tropical reverie. "It melted like sugar snow," wrote one gentleman. "It tasted like golden laughter," scribbled a woman with 8 cats and an entire room of pineapple-themed china. You're still licking the juice from your lips when the hostess announces something truly shocking. The rind will be saved. You watch as she lifts the husk and places it delicately into a glass box. "For the archives," she says, as if preserving the Ark of the Covenant. And here's where things really take a turn. She leads the guests into a side room, small, cool, dimly lit. Inside, pineapple relics, actual relics, shrines, bits of rind from past tastings, labeled with the date, the guests, and even comments like, "ripe, but slightly underwhelming," or "tasted of tears in heaven." There's a hushed reverence to it, like walking through a crypt. You almost feel compelled to kneel, and you realize this isn't about flavor anymore. It's about memory, about turning a moment of sweetness into a permanent story. You're not just eating a fruit, you're becoming part of its cult. One guest whispers, "I shall never eat another." Another replies, "You can't. Nothing else compares." And truly, how could it? The pineapple isn't just delicious. It's a fleeting miracle. A gold-tipped time bomb that tastes best when chased, not devoured. It forces you to slow down, to notice, to feel, even if those feelings are ridiculous. Even if you're crying over fruit in a stranger's drawing room. Later that night, you lie awake in your guest bed, the taste still lingering faintly on your tongue. You stare at the ceiling. You think about what you witnessed, the ceremony, the reverence, the spiky orb of chaos that somehow made the world feel sacred for a moment. And you think maybe that's what magic really is, just a bite. You wake to the sound of carriage wheels on gravel, birdsong, and a faint scent of tropical sweetness still clinging to your senses. You smile groggily, recalling last night's tasting. But today brings a new flavor of absurdity, one less elegant and far more competitive. Because today you've been invited to a pineapple duel. No, not with swords, though honestly that would make as much sense. This is a duel of status. 2 noblemen, 2 pineapples, 1 winner. It's part of a growing trend among the upper class, publicly parading their pineapples to assert dominance. You arrive at the venue, a vast country estate with suspiciously tropical landscaping. The guests are already gathered, gossiping with fans and monocles at the ready. On either end of the lawn sit velvet-draped platforms, each bearing a pineapple under glass. The duelists are announced. Lord Pembroke, known for his exquisite lowland pineries. Baron Eldridge, whose gardener is rumored to sleep beside the pine pits for warmth and psychic bonding. You take your place along the row of spectators, heart pounding in a way that embarrasses you. An appointed judge, probably some underpaid botanist in ceremonial robes, steps forward. He circles each pineapple slowly, hands clasped, expression stern. First, he inspects for ripeness. Pembroke's fruit is golden with a blush of pink. Eldridge's is pure sun yellow. The judge taps each one gently with a silver spoon. They thunk like bells. The crowd gasps appreciatively. Next, symmetry. He runs a gloved hand along the spiral pattern of scales. Eldridge's crown is taller. Pembroke's is more compact. Whispers erupt. A lady faints. Then comes the final test, aroma. He lifts the glass domes and leans in. He sniffs once, twice, eyes closed, then scribbles something on a scroll with an exaggerated flourish. The results are in. But first, a word from the duelists. Each is allowed a prepared speech. They wax poetic. They cite growing temperatures, manure blends, morning dew frequencies. Eldridge invokes Horace. Pembroke drops a Latin pun. It's a lot. The judge clears his throat, unrolls the parchment, and reads, "For balance, for scent, and for boldness of crown, the victor is Lord Pembroke." The crowd erupts. Eldridge maintains a stiff smile but immediately orders his gardener to recalibrate the southern pit beds. You watch in awe, not at the competition itself, but at what it represents. These people have turned horticulture into performance art. The pineapple has become a trophy, a brag, a one-fruit Olympics. And it doesn't stop there. You hear rumors of pineapple forgeries. Not the wax models from earlier, but actual fruit fraud. Enterprising scoundrels taking inferior tropical fruit, carving them into pineapple shapes, dyeing the skin, even gluing on artificial crowns. You think this is a joke until someone produces an exhibit from a legal trial. A mango disguised and passed off as a Jamaican hybrid. Historians still argue whether any of these forgery cases led to real punishment, but the fact they existed speaks volumes. There's also talk of pineapple kidnappings. Not people, pineapples. One lord allegedly paid a ransom after his ripest specimen vanished the night before his garden banquet. The fruit was returned unharmed, but covered in cryptic notes like, "You grow, we watch. Who did it? No one knows." Some say it was the rival estate. Others blame a secret pineapple society. Yes, you heard that right. Formed by disgruntled gardeners who felt unappreciated and wished to liberate the fruit. You begin to suspect the pineapple isn't just a status symbol anymore. It's a social weapon, a currency of prestige, a fruit so powerful that people are willing to lie, steal, and faint over it. And you, strange as it seems, don't blame them, because every time you see that spiky golden silhouette, something inside you stirs. A mix of hunger and wonder, longing and laughter. It's not rational. It's not even explainable. It's just pineapple magic. And here, in the crisp English air, among powdered wigs and velvet gloves, you start to understand that the pineapple isn't ridiculous at all. It's perfect. Because what's more human than turning a piece of fruit into a dream? You've now seen pineapples paraded, worshipped, painted, and battled. You've tasted the glory and breathed the scented hysteria. So you think, surely we've hit peak pineapple. But no, because tonight, tucked away in the conservatory of a viscount's countryside manor, you're about to enter the strangest chapter of them all, the pineapple and the empire. You sip your tea and glance at the walls, maps of the Caribbean, trade routes marked in thread and ink. There's a globe in the corner and, naturally, a pineapple-shaped inkwell on the desk. The host begins his lecture. It's casual, chatty, laced with that dangerous brand of aristocratic charm that masks something much darker underneath. He talks about the pineapple as a gift of empire, a fruit of conquest, a symbol of Britain's global reach. You pause, because suddenly the air feels different. This isn't just about novelty anymore. It's about power, colonial power. The pineapple wasn't grown in English soil, not naturally. It came from the West Indies, from colonies drenched in heat, sugar, sweat, and slavery. To grow pineapples in bulk, you needed land. You needed workers. And in the 18th century, workers often meant enslaved people on plantations in Jamaica, Barbados, and Grenada. The fruit of paradise came at a brutal price. Historians still argue how directly tied pineapple cultivation was to the broader slave economy, whether pineapples were more a byproduct of sugar production or a crop in their own right. But either way, the association is there. Sweetness made from suffering. You sit in silence as the host continues, oblivious to the unease in the room. Or perhaps he likes it. He gestures to a pineapple centerpiece and says with a smile, "Every inch of that came at a cost. And wasn't it worth it?" You want to throw your tea, but you don't, because this is part of the pineapple story, too. For all its absurdity, the fruit was also a tool of empire. A symbol not just of wealth, but of domination. Owning one said, "I have power over distant lands. I control ships. I command labor you'll never see." It was a quiet kind of arrogance, a fragrant flag. And so the pineapple wormed its way into imperial iconography. It appeared on colonial architecture, carved into the facades of government buildings in tropical ports. It topped gates and graced flags. One British general even commissioned a pineapple-shaped tombstone. You imagine him now, buried beneath layers of limestone carved to resemble a fruit he probably never even ate. And it wasn't just the British. The Dutch, the Spanish, the French, they all had their pineapple moments. A kind of spiky, pan-European arms race, played out in botanical gardens and banquet halls. One French envoy bragged in a letter home that he'd gifted a pineapple to a local ruler in India, who seemed greatly moved by its fragrance and nearly wept. Whether this is true or colonial fan fiction, we'll never know. But you do know this: the pineapple was used, again and again, as a symbol of superiority, a trophy of control, a mask for cruelty. And yet it's still beautiful, still delicious, still oddly moving. You wrestle with that contradiction, because the pineapple represents both aspiration and exploitation, innocent wonder and imperial pride, the sweet and sour, just like the history it rode in on. And that duality, that layered truth, makes it more human than ever. You step outside for air. The moon is high, the wind is warm. Somewhere behind you, laughter erupts over sherry and charades. The pineapple glows through the window like a tiny sun. You take a deep breath, because if you're going to keep following this story, you need to accept something essential. No object is ever just an object. Not even a fruit, especially not this one. The next morning brings you to a quieter street. No velvet-draped showrooms, no orchestras or powdered duels. Just a narrow shop tucked between a bookbinder and a milliner. Its windows dusty, its sign faded, but its purpose unmistakable. Madame Bellamy's pineapple replicas, for rent or purchase. Wax, glass, papier-mâché, satisfaction guaranteed. You step inside and are immediately greeted by a wave of fruity perfume and the faint clatter of molds being turned. The air smells of beeswax, glue, and desperation. And there they are, rows upon rows of pineapples, gleaming, shiny, utterly fake. Some are made of wax, faintly translucent and tinged with careful hand-painted gradients. Others are blown from glass, golden and brittle, their spikes carefully molded for maximum realism. You even spot a few made from papier-mâché, coated in lacquer and perched on brass stands. A young assistant with ink-stained hands glances up. "Looking for something lifelike or stately?" she asks, as if you were choosing a wig for the theater. You raise an eyebrow. "Are people really renting these?" She grins. "More than you'd think. Much safer than the real thing. No spoilage, no theft, no temptation." You walk the rows slowly, stunned. These pineapples have been to balls, garden parties, engagement feasts. Each one carries a tag. Borrowed by Lady Chiswick, 1762. Displayed but not tasted. Used in parliamentary reception, Edinburgh. Not returned on time. Rejected by Earl of Somerton due to inferior gleam. Historians still argue just how widespread this replica rental practice became. Some claim it was mostly confined to the merchant class, eager to mimic the nobility without the price tag. Others suggest even elite families quietly leaned on a good fake in a pinch. Because let's be honest, pineapples are fragile. Their journey from Jamaica to London is perilous, their shelf life tragically short. And when status hangs in the balance, why risk the real thing? You spot a crate labeled Late Autumn Models, featuring pineapples painted with subtle brown speckling to mimic late-season aging. Another shelf offers discreet pineapple crowns for customers who wish to display part of the fruit sticking out of a floral arrangement, just enough to suggest possession without full commitment. It's delightful. It's ridiculous. It's genius. You meet Madame Bellamy herself, a petite woman in a wine-colored gown with resin smudges on her cuffs. She adjusts her spectacles and shows you her latest innovation: modular pineapples. That is, fake fruits with detachable segments that can be swapped out for different hues, crown styles, and even custom family crests. Very popular with estate painters, she says with a wink. Some folks want their portraits to include the pineapple, but aren't ready to commit to the real thing. You glance at one particularly gaudy model with gold-leafed scales and a silver stalk. That one ever see the light of day? Only once, she whispers. A wedding in Bath. Bride wore matching embroidery. Of course she did. You start to see the bigger picture now. The pineapple isn't just food. It's theater. And replicas? They're the props. The safe, recyclable fantasy for those who can't afford the real myth, or who simply want to avoid the fruit flies. But not everyone approves. You stumble upon a dusty pamphlet near the register. The Deception of Wax, a treatise against false fruit. It includes passages like, "When we fake the fruit, we rob the soul," and "Only the divine rot of the real pineapple proves our virtue." You read it twice and laugh, loudly, but you get it. Even now, people wrestle with authenticity: what's real, what's worth showing, what's performative. The pineapple just happened to be the spiky canvas onto which 18th century Europe painted all its insecurities. As you leave the shop, Madame Bellamy waves and says, "If you ever need one for a dinner party, come early. The best ones go fast." You step back into the cobblestone street, blinking at the daylight. Somewhere a carriage clatters by. Someone's dog barks. A woman down the road is holding what you think is a pineapple, but after the morning you've had, you can't be sure. And maybe that's the point. In this age of illusion and aspiration, the line between real and replica blurs like fog over a pinery. But either way, the fruit still gleams. By now, you've tasted the fruit, seen it worshipped, faked, stolen, and serenaded. You've stood beneath stone pineapples and gazed into their waxen cousins. But just when you think there's nothing left to discover, someone leans in during a crowded supper and whispers, "Did you hear about the great pineapple heist?" You choke a little on your wine, because no matter how surreal this fruit's journey has been, you never expected to hear the word heist. But oh yes, the pineapple has been stolen, not once, not twice, but frequently enough that by the mid-18th century, some households had special fruit security protocols. You're invited to visit one such estate. The butler greets you at the gate with an expression so grim, you expect to be told someone has died. "No, sir," he says gravely. "We recently suffered an incident." The story unfolds like a penny dreadful. 2 nights prior, a ripe pineapple vanished from the main dining room. No broken windows, no damaged locks, just poof, gone. Vanished into the fog. What was left? A moist circle on the silver platter and an ominous calling card. A single pineapple scale, left behind like a challenge. You suppress a grin. The estate is in uproar. The master has interrogated the gardener, the cook, even the chimney sweep. No one's confessed. The housekeeper now sleeps beside the pinery with a loaded musket. It gets better. You learn there's a growing black market for stolen pineapples. In London, a whisper network of brokers, mostly ex-servants and disgraced kitchen boys, trade in hot fruit. You could, in theory, purchase a stolen pineapple for a fraction of the cost. But you'd have to know the right apothecary, use the correct phrase, and bring your own sack. Historians still argue whether these underground fruit rings were widespread or mostly urban legend. But police reports from the time include actual accounts of unauthorized pineapple possession, and even one tragicomic story of a constable who mistook a prickly melon for contraband and confiscated it mid-picnic. You shake your head, but part of you understands. When a fruit is worth more than gold, it's bound to attract thieves. You hear about the infamous greenhouse ghost, a figure who, legend claims, stole over a dozen pineapples across Norfolk without ever being seen. Some say it was a rival lord. Others insist it was a disgruntled horticulturist seeking revenge. One overly dramatic pamphlet swears it was a spectral gardener, haunting those who grew the fruit without proper reverence. No one ever found him, but the thefts triggered a wave of innovation. Pineapple locks, pineapple cages. One estate installed a bell system that would ring the moment the fruit was even nudged. Another built a moat, yes, a literal moat, around the greenhouse. And not just water. Swans. Angry ones. You hear of one green-thumbed nobleman who kept a falcon perched inside the pinery at night. Not for flying. Just watching. Theft wasn't limited to ripe pineapples, either. Even the immature, sour ones, the ones weeks from sweetness, were at risk. Because their mere potential was enough to fetch a decent price among desperate merchants and second-tier aristocrats. And in the most scandalous cases, staff were complicit. A few footmen made small fortunes by smuggling pineapples out under their coats or, this is real, disguising them as infants in bonnets. You try to imagine a man cradling a swaddled fruit and whispering, "Hush now, darling," as he sneaks past the guards. It's ridiculous. It's beautiful. And through it all, the pineapple sits at the center of this madness, cool and golden, daring the world to keep up. By the time you leave the estate, the master is still brooding, the greenhouse is under surveillance, and you're fairly certain the gardener is sleeping with one eye open. You walk away smiling, because if there's one thing this fruit has proven, it's that it commands loyalty. It incites desire, causes chaos, not because it wants to, but because we let it. And somewhere, not far from here, a thief is slicing a stolen pineapple into quarters, savoring it slowly in a candlelit room, whispering, "Worth it." By now, you've wandered through the social circus and the shadowy backrooms of pineapple obsession. But tonight, you stumble upon something even stranger, so strange that it makes stolen pineapples and fruit-shaped buildings seem entirely reasonable. Because tonight, you are handed a leather-bound poetry anthology titled The Sensual Crown, Verses Inspired by the Anonymous. Yes, you read that right. Welcome to the secret life of pineapples as objects of desire. You flip through it under candlelight, and the words leap out like whispered confessions. Her lips, like syruped rind, did part slash and taste the fruit that tamed my heart. Spikes that guard a core so sweet, slash I dream of her, of fruit, of heat. You blink, look around, check that you're alone, and keep reading. This isn't parody. This is passion. Somewhere in the depths of 18th-century literary salons, a group of writers, thinkers, and hopeless romantics decided that the pineapple wasn't just exotic, it was erotic. Historians still argue how widespread this perception really was, whether it was confined to a niche set of overly imaginative poets or if the pineapple truly held sway as a symbol of sensual longing. But the literature is clear. Pineapples had become flirtation fuel. You attend a gathering at a private residence, supposedly an innocent poetry reading. The guests are refined, the furniture velvet, the punch spiked, a harpist plays softly in the corner. Then, the hostess steps forward and reads aloud. He peeled me gently, slow with dread, slash and I, like fruit, gave up my thread. Someone coughs. Someone else fans themselves vigorously. You sip your drink. Slowly. The symbolism is unavoidable. The pineapple, with its sharp exterior and luscious interior, becomes the perfect metaphor. A sensual riddle. Hard to reach, slow to open, but inside sweetness that overwhelms. You meet a playwright working on a tragic love story where the star-crossed lovers meet in a pinery. A painter shares a portrait of Venus lounging beside a sliced pineapple. A certain countess is said to have worn a necklace of tiny gold pineapple charms to suggest her ripeness, which somehow made it into the social papers. It gets bolder. One anonymous pamphlet, cheaply printed but clearly popular, is titled, "The Forbidden Fruit That Isn't an Apple." It contains thinly veiled metaphors and a shocking illustration of a gentleman holding a halved pineapple before a swooning debutante. The church, predictably, was not amused. You hear of sermons warning against tropical temptations and fruits that ignite base hungers. One bishop allegedly blamed rising scandalous behavior on the increased availability of pineapples. He called them nature's corsets, tight, golden, and built to undo men's restraint. You honestly can't tell if that's condemnation or admiration. Of course, not everyone leaned into the lusty lore. Many simply found pineapples delightful, mysterious, or amusing. But in the opulent language of the time, where everything meant something, the pineapple came to represent a whole range of things people couldn't quite say aloud. It became a code. Sending someone a pineapple motif was flirtation. An embroidered pineapple on a handkerchief could imply availability or suggest you'd tasted luxury. One salon hostess even had pineapple candles made for her suitors. Only one man noticed and married her within the year. You think of how obsessed people were, still are. We give symbols their power. We pour meaning into objects until they spill over and become art, or sin, or both. And somewhere, probably this very night, someone is sketching a pineapple onto parchment by lamplight, adding soft curves and subtle shadows, not for a botanical journal, but for a love letter. Because what better emblem than a fruit that must be earned? That wounds before it satisfies. That demands attention and gets it. As the evening ends and you fold the poetry book closed, you realize this was never just about hunger of the body. It was always about hunger of the soul. And maybe that's why it all makes perfect sense. The next day, as the fog lifts over the garden hedges and chimney smoke curls gently into the sky, you decide to take a breather. Enough velvet, enough wax fruit, enough poetry that borders on culinary seduction. Today, you want something simple. So you head to a modest townhouse in London where a young furniture maker named Mr. Whitmore greets you with sawdust in his hair and a pineapple carved into the handle of his toolbox. Just a little touch of hospitality, he says, smiling, and you realize you've entered the age of pineapple furniture. Yes, somehow the fruit has now infiltrated interior design. And not subtly either. Mr. Whitmore leads you through his workshop, past half-assembled chairs and polished banisters. Clients love him, he says, tapping the top of a bedpost shaped like a pineapple. They say it brings good luck, or at least good conversation. You nod slowly, and then you see it, his piece de resistance. A massive dining table with pineapple legs. Not carvings of pineapples. Entire pineapples, rendered in oak with spiraled scales and hand-painted crowns, supporting the weight of 12 chairs, 5 place settings, and an unreasonable number of forks. You can't look away. He shows you his catalog. Pineapple mantelpieces, pineapple chandeliers, pineapple sconces. He even designed a chamber pot with a lid shaped like the fruit, for a duchess. He adds, not entirely proudly. You laugh, but then he opens a drawer and pulls out something exquisite. A doorknob made of mother of pearl, subtly shaped and etched like a miniature pineapple. It's the little things, he says. Historians still argue whether pineapple iconography spread because of actual affection or sheer bandwagoning. But either way, by the late 18th century, if your home didn't have at least one pineapple feature, you were considered unadventurous. You walk through the drawing room of another client, a fashionable widow, and find pineapples on the drapes, pineapples stitched into the cushions, pineapples carved into the legs of the piano. It's not a room anymore. It's a shrine. Guests feel welcomed, she insists, sipping pineapple tea. The fruit symbolizes warmth and generosity, you know? And she's right. In a strange twist of fate, the pineapple has been rebranded as the ultimate emblem of hospitality. Probably because it was so rare and expensive, offering it, or even the idea of it, became the height of generosity. Some scholars believe this is where the pineapple's modern symbolism began. You've probably seen it. Pineapple doormats, pineapple towels, pineapple-shaped welcome signs. They're still around, still smiling, still sticky with history. You visit a church, Anglican, modest, and notice pineapples carved into the pulpit. Symbol of the harvest. The vicar explains, though you're fairly certain no one's harvesting pineapples in Yorkshire. Still, the message is clear. By placing pineapples in architecture, in furniture, in the very bones of the home, people weren't just showing off anymore. They were inviting others in. They were saying, I have tasted paradise, and now you're welcome here, too. You realize this is the next phase of the fruit's evolution. Not just wealth, not just fantasy, but connection. The pineapple becomes a signal, one that says, I value you enough to offer something rare, even if that something is now made of mahogany or stitched into the curtains. One local paper even features a profile on pineapple hosts, elite families who host weekly gatherings around their pineapple-themed dining rooms. The article includes recipes, etiquette tips, and a quote that makes you snort into your waistcoat. Nothing bonds souls faster than shared admiration of an exotic fruit. You think about the people you've met, the whispering poets, the battling gardeners, the pineapple portraitists and sneaky thieves. And now this pineapple as domestic ritual. Pineapple as design language. From Caribbean soil to drawing room decor, the fruit has transformed yet again. It no longer needs to be tasted to be felt. It has become an idea. And as Mr. Whitmore waves you goodbye and offers a pineapple-shaped candlestick on the house, you realize you've officially crossed over. You are no longer merely observing the pineapple cult. You are part of it. Tonight, you find yourself seated in the back corner of a candlelit salon, sipping something fizzy and watching a scholar enthusiastically adjust his cravat before stepping up to a small wooden lectern. His hair is wild. His notes are disorganized. His eyes shine with the light of a man who has read too many travel journals. He clears his throat and begins. Ladies and gentlemen, let us now consider the pineapple as a metaphor for the exotic other. Here we go. You lean back as he launches into a deeply impassioned and slightly unhinged lecture about tropical fantasy, colonial exoticism, and the role of fruit in fueling European imaginations. You're in for a ride. According to our flamboyant professor, the pineapple wasn't merely a fruit. It was the European subconscious projected onto a plant. It stood in for the tropics, for lushness, for unspoiled, untamed beauty. It became, in short, a symbol of everything Europe wanted from the rest of the world and feared it might never deserve. You glance around the room. Some nod sagely, others look confused. One woman is visibly swooning, though that might just be the wine. The scholar continues. He shows illustrations. Pineapples in paintings of paradise. Pineapples in the background of colonial maps. Pineapples carved into fountains in Lisbon, in villas outside Florence, in Parisian garden gates. In all of them, the pineapple is never just present. It's glowing, central, framed like a trophy. He reads aloud a line from an explorer's diary. I beheld a fruit that could only have been kissed by the breath of God. A bit much, but you get the point. You begin to see how the pineapple became a stand-in for lands untouched, for wealth unclaimed, for people uninvited to the table. It symbolized access, power, possession of paradise, bottled into a single, sweet-smelling orb. Historians still argue whether Europeans genuinely believed the tropics were Edenic or if that was just convenient branding. But either way, the pineapple helped sell the fantasy. And what a fantasy it was. You hear how stage plays in London used painted pineapples to set scenes in the West Indies. How travel writers mentioned them not for their taste, but for their shape, their seductiveness, their strange elegance. You learn that colonial governors in the Caribbean were expected to gift pineapples to visiting diplomats, as a subtle way of saying, look what we control. Some even included the fruit in official crests and seals, because nothing says imperial pride like spiky fruit with a god complex. You close your eyes and imagine a ship arriving in port, a crate marked with burnished pineapples, a footman hurrying to deliver the first fruit of the season to a lord who doesn't care where it came from, only that it arrived before his cousin got one. The professor pauses, adjusts his glasses, then leans in dramatically. "And let us not forget," he whispers, "that the pineapple's exoticism wasn't real, it was constructed." Meaning, the fruit wasn't wild. It had been cultivated, transported, manipulated, and marketed. It was curated paradise, synthetic desire, a colonial fantasy wrapped in green spikes and golden skin. Someone claps softly. You think of all the meanings this fruit has gathered. It was once a bribe, a gift, a weapon, a flirtation, a crime, a poem, a chair leg, a dream. And here, in this cozy salon with its red velvet curtains and slightly dusty bust of Voltaire, you watch as the pineapple morphs one more time into a mirror. Because what people saw in it, they wanted, they imagined, they feared. It was never about the fruit. It was about them. You walk home slowly that night, the streets damp with recent rain. You pass a bakery with pineapple-shaped tarts, a tavern with a carved pineapple swinging above its door. You think, this fruit has been everywhere. And more than that, it has meant everything. And somehow, even knowing all of this, you still smile when you spot it, still crave it, still believe in it a little, because the pineapple didn't just survive European obsession. It thrived on it. You're back in the garden. Not a showy estate this time, not a pinery guarded by falcons or wax doppelgangers, but a modest patch of land behind a school in the countryside. The smell of manure hangs in the air, mingled with the sharp green scent of growing things. A young boy is kneeling beside a low bed of leafy stalks, carefully brushing away dirt from a small, stunted pineapple. It's barely the size of a clenched fist. Not golden, not glamorous, but real. "Grew it myself," he says proudly, holding it up like a war medal. "Didn't think it'd work." You crouch beside him and nod, because this right here might be the most miraculous part of the story so far. The democratization of the pineapple. As transport improved, as greenhouses became more efficient, and as colonial trade systems expanded, pineapples became more available. Not cheap, not common, but less impossible. The fruit that once required servants, secrets, and ceremonies could now slowly trickle into the hands of those outside the top crust of society. You walk through the town market later that week and see it for yourself. Pineapples. Not under glass, not behind velvet ropes, but stacked in small wooden crates. Still expensive, still exotic, but touchable. And that changes everything. Now, for the first time, people begin to taste the myth instead of just displaying it. Historians still debate the exact year pineapples went from aristocratic marvel to upper-middle-class indulgence. But many mark the late 1700s as the turning point. Trade routes stabilized. Caribbean plantations flooded the ports. And suddenly, a fruit that once held Europe hostage could be bought, sometimes by people without titles. You imagine the first grocer who sliced one open in front of customers. The first curious baker who dared use pineapple in a tart. The first family who passed it around, unsure whether to eat it or baptize it. Of course, the magic dimmed a little. With greater availability came familiarity. And with familiarity came indifference. The pineapple, once a stage star, began to play smaller roles. It's still shown, but it no longer blinded. That's the great irony of luxury, isn't it? Once everyone can have it, it ceases to be extraordinary. A pamphlet you find tucked into a bookstall calls this the decline of fruit as symbol. Its author laments that pineapples are now being served alongside cold ham at merchant banquets, that children are eating them without reverence, that once the fruit meant everything, and now it's just pudding. You feel a small pang reading that, because yes, something was lost when the pineapple became ordinary. The rituals, the anticipation, the absurdity, the duels and the shrines and the furniture carved with devotion. But something was gained, too. Access, taste, joy. A former maid turned smallholder tells you how she saved for months to buy a single pineapple to celebrate her mother's birthday. She cried when she tasted it, she says, smiling. Said it was like eating a flower. You visit a sailor's widow who keeps a pineapple pattern embroidered on a pillow. Not to flaunt, but to remember the day her late husband brought one back from Havana, wrapped in straw and tied with string. You realize, the pineapple didn't disappear when it lost its pedestal. It evolved. It became part of everyday celebration. A sweet surprise, a hint of something tropical in a cold, gray world. A rare guest at a humble table. It became real. And in some ways, that's the most magical transformation of all. Because what once was hoarded is now shared. What once was sacred is now savored. And though the shrines may have faded, the sweetness remains. You take one last look at the boy in the garden. He's planting a second pineapple now, this time for his sister. No guards, no silver dome, just earth, warmth, and hope. The pineapple may no longer require an entourage or a greenhouse moat, but it hasn't left the stage. It's just learned a few new tricks. Tonight, you attend a culinary exhibition in the city. A fashionable affair held in a grand hall lit by chandeliers and a suspiciously high number of candelabras shaped like pineapples. The theme? The world on a plate. The centerpiece? You guessed it. The pineapple now re-enters the spotlight, not as a status symbol, not as a symbol of empire, but as a flavor, a recipe, a taste to be explored, experimented with, and sometimes misunderstood entirely. You hover near a row of dishes as a chef in a very tall hat explains his creation. Pineapple, slow roasted over peat moss, served with eel, fennel, and a whisper of mustard. You nod politely and move on. Historians still argue whether pineapple actually paired well with most 18th century cooking, or whether people simply pretended it did to impress their guests. Either way, it started appearing in everything from meat pies to mousses to medicinal broths. One cookbook from 1792 lists pineapple in 47 different dishes, including a disastrous attempt at pineapple sausages. You meet a baker who reverently lifts the lid of a delicate tart to reveal layers of golden pineapple slices nestled in cream. "We call it sun-in pastry," she beams. Some say it inspired the early Victorian obsession with fruited desserts. You smile, but the pineapple's culinary journey doesn't stop there. At another table, a merchant proudly pours a small glass of pineapple wine, fermented from the overripe rejects of his warehouse. It's sharp, earthy, slightly unsettling. At the next, pineapple vinegar, used in everything from salad dressings to scalp tonics. Cleans the blood. Someone tells you with confidence that is 80% theater and 20% questionable science. And then, in the corner, you find the ultimate showstopper, flaming pineapple pudding. It's wheeled out with dramatic flair. The lights dim. Brandy is poured. The top is lit. Blue flames dance across a fruit-laced dome like spirits at a masquerade. The crowd gasps. Someone claps. You resist the urge to yell encore. In this new age, the pineapple becomes performance food. Not just sustenance, but spectacle. Even common folk, those who could never afford to grow or display the fruit, begin to cook with canned versions, imported syrups, or powdered essences. Recipes with grand names like Island Elixir Porridge or Jamaican Fantasy Toast appear in magazines, though they've likely never been within a hemisphere of the actual tropics. Still, they try, because even diluted, even processed, the pineapple retains its sparkle, its mystique, its taste of somewhere far away. A minister at the exhibition leans in and says, "I add it to punch at baptisms. Brings joy." You meet a child named Ananas. Her mother says she chose the name because it means delight. You want to cry a little, but in a good way. The pineapple, you realize, has moved from the hands of the elite into the hearts of the people. It's no longer about owning it. It's about sharing it, tasting it, honoring the journey it took to arrive on your plate. You nibble on a roasted pineapple skewer drizzled in clove syrup and think, this is still a fruit that carries stories. Even here, amid small talk and stovetops, it hasn't lost its glow. And isn't that remarkable? Because how many trends burn brightly and vanish? How many symbols collapse under the weight of their own absurdity? But not this one. The pineapple adapted, transformed, lingered. It became something you could love for more than just the myth. It became something you could cook. The party is over. The flaming pudding has smoldered into sweet ash. The pineapple wine sits half-drunk in crystal glasses. And you, once a curious observer, now find yourself haunted by the golden fruit in your dreams. So you go searching again. This time not for flavor or flair or feast. This time for ghosts. Because as the pineapple fever cooled into the 19th century, something peculiar happened. The grand pineries? Abandoned. The grand portraits? Dusted over. And all those pineapple-crowned estates? Quiet. It's the strange, forgotten chapter in this fruit's journey. The ghosts of the pineapple cult. You visit one such place. A manor once famous for its 7-tier pineapple glasshouses. Now it's all ivy and moss. The roof has collapsed in places. Vines climb through broken panes like they're trying to reclaim what once belonged to the earth. And there, near the garden's edge, stands a rusted weather vane in the shape of, you guessed it, a pineapple. You walk through the ruins, past marble fountains shaped like pineapples, past stair banisters where the carvings have worn smooth, past a locked closet where, legend says, someone once kept a pineapple diary, a record of fruit dreams, cultivation rituals, even pineapple-related romantic disappointments. You feel the weight of all that longing. Historians still argue why the obsession faded. Some blame the invention of refrigerated shipping, which made tropical fruit widely accessible. Others say the French Revolution changed fashion, ushering in a new age where luxury was suspect and pineapples were no longer welcome symbols. They were reminders of indulgence. But even in decline, the pineapple left fingerprints. You explore dusty libraries and find books with yellowed pages titled The Gentle Art of Pineapple Cultivation. You see worn recipe cards for pineapple creams that haven't been made in generations. You discover pressed pineapple leaves in flower journals, like relics from a once-forbidden romance. And you meet the odd collector, people who remember, who keep old pineapple molds in glass cases, who save seeds not to grow, but to honor. One elderly woman shows you a faded photograph of her grandmother standing beside a pineapple tree in Jamaica. She said it was the first time she believed in beauty, she whispers. Hits you hard, because this isn't about fruit anymore. It never was. It's about the afterglow, the lingering hum of a cultural obsession that burned bright and then faded like old perfume. You feel it in the empty halls, the dusty wallpapers, the once gilded pineapple trinkets now dulled with time. You find a children's book from 1837, handwritten and illustrated, titled The Pineapple Princess. It's a fairy tale about a girl who grows the world's last pineapple and uses it to warm a dying winter. You read it aloud to yourself and feel something ache behind your ribs. Because once, the pineapple wasn't just admired. It was believed in. Even now, you sense its phantom. Not in greenhouses or banquets or flirtatious poems, but in quiet corners, in vintage embroidery, in architectural oddities, in the gentle curves of a forgotten brass doorknob, shaped like a fruit that once meant everything. You walk through one last abandoned pinery, the glass cracked, the earth dry, the old brick floor still warm from sun long gone, and in that silence you could almost hear it, the echo of a gardener's footsteps, the hush of guests gathering around a single glowing fruit, the breathless pause before the knife makes the first cut. You kneel, brush away some dirt, and find a fragment of an old pineapple mold, terracotta, glazed. Useless now, but still beautiful, still magical. The cult is gone, but the myth, it lingers. And now, here you are, centuries later, standing in the checkout line at a modern supermarket. There's a pineapple in your cart. It's not under glass. It's not flanked by liveried servants or lit by candelabras. It's nestled between a loaf of bread and a carton of oat milk, its leafy crown poking out like a half-forgotten royal. No one gasps. No one swoons. The cashier doesn't flinch. She just scans it with a beep. And yet, you can't help but smile. Because this is the final twist in the tale. You're still under the spell. You walk home, the pineapple tucked under one arm, and begin to notice things. Pineapple earrings in the window of a boutique. A welcome mat printed with "Be Sweet" in curly script beside a watercolor pineapple. A hotel lobby sculpture. A metallic, abstract pineapple bursting from a marble base. You start seeing it everywhere. It's on wine labels, phone cases, trendy socks, wallpaper, neon bar signs, kitchen tiles, children's backpacks, and tattoos, dozens of them, inked into ankles and collarbones and wrists, little golden spikes of nostalgia. Historians still argue when exactly the pineapple made its full transition from luxury object to kitsch. Was it the tiki bar craze of the mid-20th century? The 1980s fruit-themed fashion boom? Pinterest? No matter. The shift is complete. And yet, despite all the irony, all the marketing, all the flattening of its meaning, something deeper still clings to the pineapple. You unpack groceries and place it gently on your counter. It looks a little smug as always, but this time it's not here to perform. It's just present. And still it whispers. It whispers of ships and storms, of plantations and parlor rooms, of love letters and velvet-wrapped duels. It hums with the ghosts of gardeners and poets and counterfeiters. It crackles with the heat of long-dead greenhouses and the dreams of women who once embroidered its shape into secret handkerchiefs. And now it's whispering to you, because you, too, are part of the story. By placing it on your counter, you're continuing a centuries-old tradition. You're honoring a fruit that has meant power, seduction, absurdity, nostalgia, warmth, and yes, magic. You light a candle. The room softens. Maybe you'll cut the pineapple tonight. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll just let it sit there, glowing in the lamplight. Because somewhere deep in your bones, you understand what 18th century Europeans understood. This isn't just fruit. It's a symbol, a memory, a joke, prayer. And tonight, as you curl up under the weight of a blanket and history, you feel something sweet and spiky in your chest. You realize the cult never died. It just changed shape. And somehow, through war and wealth and wallpaper, through stolen dreams and sugar-spiked punch bowls, the pineapple made it all the way here, to you. So now, as your eyelids grow heavy and the hum of the world softens to a sleepy blur, picture it again. Just one pineapple, sitting quietly, not as a monument, not as a prize, but simply being. Its golden sides catch the last shimmer of candlelight. Its leaves tilt ever so slightly, like it's listening to you, or waiting. Maybe it is. Maybe it always was. Breathe in slow. Let your mind wander through pineries and parlors, through painted ceilings and dust-covered diaries, through laughter and longing, the absurd and the tender. Remember that fruit can be funny, and fruit can be sacred, and sometimes fruit can carry a world on its back. So when you see a pineapple next, whether in a grocery aisle, on a postcard, or tucked into someone's tattoo sleeve, don't laugh too quickly. Pause. Remember what it once was, what it still is if you let it be. A crown-shaped echo of centuries past. A story hiding inside sweetness. A quiet invitation to believe in a little wonder. Now breathe out. Let go of the century. Let go of the fruit. Let go of everything. Just for tonight. You're safe. You're warm. And somewhere, not far from your dreams, a pineapple glows gently in the dark. Sweet dreams. Crescent moon pineapple.